Prince Harry made his first public remarks tonight.
I must say that I can only imagine what you may have heard or perhaps read over the past few weeks.
Harry says he and Meghan felt they had no other option but to leave the royal family behind.
It was not just a bad day in court. It was a collapse. One moment, Prince Harry stood as the accuser, convinced he was exposing a dark system that ruined his life. The next, everything shifted. The courtroom mood changed. The judge's patience thinned. And behind him, the people paid to protect him began to lose faith. This was the nightmare Harry never planned for. He came to the High Court believing he was fighting a moral war against the British press. He believed the truth was on his side. He believed the evidence would prove he was hunted, targeted, and abused by powerful newspapers. But instead of victory, he found himself isolated, exposed, and facing warnings that cut straight through his confidence. This was not a clean legal battle. It was a slow unraveling. At the center of the case were Harry's accusations against associated newspapers. He told the court that journalists used illegal methods to invade his private life. He described a pattern of stalking and criminal behavior. He named reporters. He painted them as villains who crossed every ethical line to exploit him. Harry's story was simple. He was the victim. They were the aggressors. For a while, that story held the room. Then the defense stood up. They did not argue emotion. They did not argue intent. They presented evidence. And with one move, they cracked the foundation of Harry's entire case. The focus turned to one specific accusation. Harry claimed a journalist had illegally gathered information about him. He framed her as someone who invaded his world without permission, someone who should never have been near his private life. The defense produced a document from 2011, a party invitation, not a rumor, not hearsay, an invitation sent by Harry himself. The court heard that this journalist was not hiding in bushes or using illegal tricks. She was inside an exclusive private party at Kensington Roof Gardens. She was there openly, socially, drinking, talking, mixing with the same people Harry trusted. Because Harry invited her, the heir left the room. The defense went further. They argued this was not a one-time coincidence. Harry and the journalist remained in overlapping social circles for years. They communicated. They moved in the same spaces. There was no clear line between hunter and victim. The implication was devastating. You cannot welcome someone into your inner circle, treat them as safe, and then years later accuse them of criminal intrusion. You cannot rewrite that history without consequences. Suddenly, Harry's narrative looked fragile. What he described as harassment now looked like participation. What he framed as abuse now looked like a relationship that benefited him at the time. The court was no longer seeing a clear victim story. It was seeing a complicated past that Harry appeared desperate to erase. And that is when the damage spread. The people sitting behind Harry were not spectators. They were his legal team, experienced professionals, people whose reputations depend on facts, not feelings. When the party evidence landed, it did not just weaken the case. It raised a terrifying question. If this part of Harry's story was wrong, what else was? Inside the courtroom, confidence drained fast. This was no longer about strategy. It was about credibility. Lawyers have a duty to the court. They cannot push arguments that evidence has already destroyed. The realization was brutal. Harry was asking them to fight a version of events that no longer held up. And that is when something extraordinary began to happen. Quietly at first. Then, unmistakably, the people meant to defend him started to pull away, because they had seen something that made continuing impossible. And once that line was crossed, there was no turning back. The fallout was immediate, and it was severe. In high-stakes litigation, lawyers do not walk away lightly. They do not abandon powerful clients in the middle of a trial unless something has gone deeply wrong. Yet that is exactly what began to happen around Prince Harry. Reports emerged that key members of his legal team had resigned. Not reshuffled. Not replaced.
Gone.
This was not a scheduling issue. It was a vote of no confidence. Prince Harry was not just another client. He was a global figure, a source of prestige and influence. For senior solicitors to step away at this stage meant one thing. They believed the case had become indefensible. Legal experts were blunt. When lawyers leave like this, it is often because the client's instructions are no longer sustainable. In simple terms, the evidence has destroyed the argument, but the client refuses to stop. The party invitation changed everything. Once it entered the record, Harry's version of events began to collapse under its own weight. The claim of constant illegal intrusion no longer matched the reality of his past behavior. His lawyers were now trapped between their duty to their client and their duty to the court. They chose the court. This was not betrayal. It was self-preservation. Continuing would have meant defending a story that evidence had already contradicted. That is how careers end in law. So they walked away, leaving Harry exposed in the most public way possible. The visual impact inside the courtroom was striking. Without his senior defenders beside him, Harry appeared diminished. Witnesses described him as tense, withdrawn, no longer projecting confidence. The defiance seen in interviews and documentaries was gone. In its place was something closer to disbelief. This was not how it was supposed to go. Harry had entered this fight believing the system would bend to his moral certainty. Instead, the system asked for proof. And when proof appeared that challenged his story, it did not bend. It pushed back. But the absence that cut deepest was not legal. As Harry sat in that wood-paneled courtroom, watching his case unravel, there was another chair that remained empty. One that observers could not stop noticing. Meghan Markle was not there. No hand-holding. No public show of unity. No visible support. For a couple who built their identity around standing together against the world, the silence was loud. Meghan was thousands of miles away, and there was no statement, no reassurance, nothing to counter the image of Harry standing alone. The optics were brutal. Harry uprooted his life to protect his family. He burned bridges with his father and brother to defend his marriage. He framed every sacrifice as necessary. Yet now, at the moment when his credibility and reputation were on the line, he was alone in the room. Observers began asking questions. Was this strategic distance? Was this damage control? Meghan has long been seen as the architect of their public strategy. She understands narratives. She understands timing. And she understands when to step back. To many watching, her absence looked deliberate. Sources suggested she saw what the lawyers saw. This case was failing. And rather than go down with it, she stayed away. That silence left Harry trapped between two worlds. The royal world he claimed rejected him, and the life he built outside it, which now seemed unwilling to stand beside him when the fight turned ugly. Without Meghan present, Harry looked different. Less certain. Less energized. The confidence he often drew from partnership was gone. The courtroom does not respond to emotion or storytelling. It responds to facts. And without someone shaping the narrative for him, Harry was forced to confront a version of his past he could not control. That pressure began to expose the deeper flaw in his case. This lawsuit was not just about privacy. It was about contradiction. Harry stood before the court demanding accountability for unlawful intrusion. He claimed this fight was about principle, about protecting private life. But the defense pressed a simple question that refused to go away. How do you sue for invasion of privacy while selling it? Harry and Meghan had made millions revealing their lives through documentaries, interviews, and books. They voluntarily disclosed intimate details to the public. They monetized their story on a global scale. And now Harry was asking the court to treat similar interest from newspapers as criminal. The contradiction was impossible to ignore. The defense did not accuse him of lying about pain. They accused him of selective outrage. When the story was told by others, it was harassment. When he told it himself, it was truth. That argument began to stick. The court was no longer hearing a clean moral case. It was seeing a man trying to control the narrative after losing control of the spotlight. And with each passing day, the gap between Harry's claims and his actions grew wider. Then another reality began to loom. One far colder than reputation: money. Because in this court, losing does not just cost pride. It comes with a bill. And for Prince Harry, that bill was starting to look terrifying. And that was before the judge even spoke. The financial danger hanging over Prince Harry is not theoretical. It is immediate, and it is brutal. This is not an American courtroom, where each side walks away paying its own lawyers. This is the British legal system. Here, the rule is simple. The loser pays. And with his case weakening by the day, Harry is staring into a financial abyss. If he loses, he does not just cover his own legal costs. He must also pay the legal bills of associated newspapers. That means 2 teams of elite London lawyers, senior barristers, endless preparation, months of work. The numbers climb fast. Legal analysts have been clear. The total could run into the millions of pounds. This is where the fantasy collapses. Harry and Meghan left the royal family to become financially independent. They succeeded by turning their private lives into products. The memoir, the documentaries, the interviews. Those deals brought in large sums, but they were not permanent income streams. Some have already dried up. Others have not been renewed. Meanwhile, the lifestyle remains expensive. A large California estate, private security, staff, public relations, and now, a transatlantic legal war that is burning cash every single day. This lawsuit is not being funded by a palace. There is no royal safety net. Every hour billed comes from Harry's pocket, and yet he keeps going. Economists call this the sunk cost trap. When someone has invested so much money, pride, and emotion into a fight that they refuse to stop, even when stopping would be rational. Walking away would mean admitting failure, admitting that the case was flawed from the start. Harry cannot do that. So he continues, throwing money after money, chasing vindication that now looks unreachable. The irony is cruel. The wealth created by selling his private life is now being used to defend a lawsuit about privacy. And if he loses, that same money may end up paying the legal fees of the very newspaper group he set out to destroy. The message sent by his lawyer's resignation has not gone unnoticed. Lawyers are practical. If they believed a major settlement or victory was coming, they would have stayed. The fact that they walked away signals something darker. There is no reward at the end of this road. Only costs. Harry wanted to bankrupt the tabloids. Instead, he is risking his own financial stability. A prince without institutional backing. A litigant without trusted counsel. A public figure fighting a system that does not care about his feelings or his status. As the judge considers whether this case can even proceed, the reality closes in. Fame does not bend evidence. Wealth does not erase receipts. And history cannot be rewritten when documents say otherwise. This courtroom does not care about narratives built on television. It cares about facts. And the facts have not been kind to Harry. He wanted to be seen as a warrior standing up to power. What the court now sees is a man cornered by his own past decisions. A man who mistook public sympathy for legal proof. A man who believed conviction alone could win. It cannot. The deeper tragedy is not just legal or financial. It is personal. Harry is fighting alone. The family he left behind is not there. The partner who once stood front and center is absent. The team that once believed in his story has walked away. All that remains is a judge, a pile of evidence, and a bill that keeps growing. This case was meant to be about justice. It has become a cautionary tale about obsession, about pride, about refusing to stop even when the warning signs are impossible to ignore. Prince Harry wanted the court to validate his truth. Instead, the court may end up delivering something far harsher. A verdict. And when it comes, it will not just decide a lawsuit. It will decide how much this war has truly cost him. Because once the ruling is handed down, there will be no speeches, no explanations, no second chances, only consequences.